The deserts to the southwest, the Rocky and Appalachian Mountains, and the vast icy regions of Alaska are all incredible geographic aids to the potential American defense. Even if
it's kind of crazy. It's like that you guys end up getting gifted by God, you know what I mean, to try to protect America. Because if you look geographic, yeah, like I said, you guys are overpowered. This is not normal. A country should not be this protected by the geography, their own land. It's actually incredible. Why has the US never been invaded? My friends, this is a really interesting question. And before we find the answer for this one, let me ask you for one thing. If you can leave a like, thank you so much. It's the best way to show support. Now, if you can subscribe, well, in that case, forget about it. You make my day. Have that in consideration. Link for the original video in my description, and let's let.
Why has the US seemingly never been successfully invaded?
Great question.
We're talking about a global superpower in an increasingly hostile world. With new superpowers on the rise and a wild history behind them.
Okay, just one thing. Actually, America is a very young country. I think it's fair to say that, right? But in the other hand, America have a lot of enemies. It's not like they thought about invading America for sure at one point, but they never did, right?
I think it's important that we try to answer this question today. Looking at why the US has never been invaded in the past can help us determine if such a risk exists in the future.
Okay, let's see it, my friend.
Stretching across 4,500 kilometers of North America, the United States is a truly massive country. It has two vast oceans flanking its east and west coast, and if we add this typography layer to this projection, you'll see it's protected from the mountains to the north and the deserts of Mexico from the south.
Okay, so the first thing is America land is protecting America. Did that make sense? But you guys know what I'm trying to say. Basically, geography, you guys are super overpowered.
If an invasion was ever attempted from the north, they'd have to navigate through mountainous terrain that acts as a shield to the US, which, by the way, includes the literal Canadian shield.
Canadian shield? What the hell is that, my friends?
Go on though, a lot of people believe that the United States has never been invaded, and that just isn't true.
Oh, wait. He's about to talk about when the British end up invading America, and I believe they even end up burning the White House. That one I don't count, in the sense that America was not the superpower that it is today. Would you guys agree with that? But I think that's what he's going to talk about.
Successful large-scale invasion of the United States was carried out over 200 years ago in 1814, during the fittingly named War of 1812. This was carried out from the north, though the War of 1812 was on paper against the British. The majority of British troops came from colonies in what is now Canada. And they did a pretty good job at it too.
Really?
The entire US defense was pretty dreadful. The British even set fire to the frickin' White House.
That's crazy to imagine, right?
Thankfully nowadays, Canadians don't seem interested in invading their southern.
Oh man, I'm going to burn in hell. I should not be laughing at this. Why do you guys think Canadians are really not? Yeah, we are not trying to invade America. Yeah, because they, you know what? Texas alone can defeat Canada. I said it.
Neighbors. Such a threat is also unlikely to come from Mexico either. Though an American invasion was attempted in the mid-1800s, the end result was the US obtaining Western land that made up over half of what was then Mexico.
Yo, my friends, actually I saw in the news, by the way, but I'm not sure if this is fake news, this was Portuguese news, so what do we know about America, right? But that Trump was thinking about doing some, I believe the word is incursions into Mexico, right on the border, of course, because of drugs, to try to control the supply that gets into America, try to stop that. I'm not sure if this is true or not, by the way, my friends. This was something that ended up appearing in the news. But I was thinking about, wait, can this start a war with Mexico? I mean, not that America is afraid of Mexico, I'm aware of that, but it's still something that could be a possibility.
In the aftermath, the US stretched from one ocean to another. now with access to vast resources and the Californian gold rush of 1848 came riches, power, and influence. And also with such vast space came protection via a wide range of geographical environments. I'm a geography nerd, and I'd love to say that America's global power came strictly because of its diverse geography. But that's not the full story. And trust me, there is a darker twist that we're gonna have to look at in a little bit.
Oh boy.
Not only defend ourselves, but this form of treachery shall never again.
But that's not to say that geography doesn't play a major part here. The deserts to the southwest, the Rocky and Appalachian Mountains, and the vast icy regions of Alaska are all incredible geographic aids to the potential American defense. Even if
it's kind of crazy. It's like that you guys end up getting gifted by God, you know what I mean, to try to protect America. Because if you look geographic, yeah, like I said, you guys are overpowered. This is not normal. A country should not be this protected by the geography, their own land. It's actually incredible.
If we move inland, much of the United States has incredible water access. The Mississippi River divides the country and has served as a major artery for centuries now. Stretching over 3,700 kilometers, the Mississippi allowed trade and travel to flourish across the US. And
you know what? I was really disappointed with one thing the other day. I ended up finding that the Mississippi River is not the longest river in America. I don't remember what's the name of the other river, but it's for very little, but the Mississippi, I believe, is second.
With the huge uptick in trade, it added to the growth of wealth that the US was experiencing. So at this point, the US is feeling pretty invincible. They are protected on all sides by geography, and they are benefiting from the riches of the land, which is inflating their ego and their wallets.
There's only one thing better than owning a vault full of cold hard cash, and that's swimming in it.
So what did they do? They sat back and called it a day. No, of course not. This is where the story starts to take a turn. Feeling protected at home and powerful, the United States moved outwards.
Move outwards?
Through the wealth that they had accumulated, they built a navy and seemed to act as any imperialist country would. Island nations around the world, such as Hawaii, the Philippines, Cuba, and Puerto Rico, all came under direct American control. Several of the territories even remain part of the US today, even if most maps of the country don't seem to show this. Guam, the US Virgin Islands, and American Samoa are all formally recognized territories of the United States.
Oh, wow.
Not all of them remain though. The Philippines would gain independence in 1946. And as for Cuba,
so the Philippines at one point was part of America? No, Cuba never was part of America, right?
Well, it's complicated. And speaking of complicated things, let's talk about the 1940s.
Okay.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
This is where everything changed for the US. War in Europe is underway, and it's pulling in countries from all over the globe. In the aftermath, much of Europe and Asia were devastated. Their economies, like their towns and cities, were in ruin. And in recent memory, the US had avoided entanglements and alliances. Think of them in this period as a little bit like Switzerland. However, instead of pure neutrality, this was more the US saying, we'll do what we want, but we won't interfere in what is happening abroad. By the end of the 1900s, though, this was definitely not the case. As war broke out, the US stood on the sidelines until attacks by the Japanese on both Pearl Harbor in Hawaii and the Philippines.
It's kind of crazy how the world could be so different if those attacks never happened, right? Because at the end of the day, I think this is not unfair to say. America ended up saving World War II because you guys ended up finishing that. Yeah, it's actually kind of crazy that everything started with Japan going crazy.
The attacks led to mass mobilization of the military, and the US came out swinging.
Since the unprovoked and dastardly attack, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Holy, that's actually
In the US,
scary.
World War II was a war fought abroad. Troops had been sent out around the world, alliances had been formed, and treaties were eventually signed that allowed the US military to keep a major stake in the lands that they had fought in. This was a huge step forward for the US with their goal to become a global superpower.
Yeah.
And this is the earliest and most notable of these plans, the Destroyer for Bases deal the US forged with the UK in 1940. In this deal, the United Kingdom was in desperate need of warships to hold off Hitler's forces. The US obliged and gave Britain 50 US Navy ships in exchange for ownership of British bases across the entire world. These type of deals would happen with other countries during World War II and into the Cold War. This was pushed in part by the threat of future invasions or nuclear attacks from the then Soviet Union. The most notable alliance to counter this threat was the formation of NATO, in which the US is a major player. This is something that we're going to look at in a little bit more depth in next week's episode.
I mean, NATO is still the main thing that protects us, Europe and America, I feel like. Even though I'm also aware that Europe needs more NATO than America needs NATO, if that makes sense. But it's still a very strong alliance, right?
In the aftermath of World War II, the United States was now the first global superpower. The true extent of the overseas American military base network is staggering. The United States, as of 2015, had over 800 military bases in operation outside of the country. Over $100 billion is spent operating these yearly, and they span over 80 countries. That is mind-blowing. Perhaps surprisingly, many of these nations seem more than willing to have the US on their land. Not all of them, Grant.
Yeah, in Portugal there is some islands with the name Açores, and I believe there is a military, American military there.
But many of them. If we go back to a purely economical side of things, it's understandable how US companies could build up in the decades after World War II. The US did not have to rebuild like Europe and Asia had to. The economy was already firing on all cylinders after the war. The 1950s saw a massive buildup of infrastructure connecting the country in ways unlike anything ever before. Granted, most of these were via highways. The reliance on car-centric infrastructure and attitudes towards economics that seemed rooted in the 1950s perhaps could explain why the US in the modern age is actually seemingly increasingly disconnected, and why China may soon surpass it as the leading global superpower. But again, those are videos for another time. Even with those issues in mind, the US itself has a serious presence around the world. Let's be real.
Honestly, I don't know about America right now, in the sense that maybe there is some problems, like the guy is mentioning. But you have to admit that American history is incredible, right, my friends? It's actually quite crazy. The way you guys end up raising... because if you really think about not that long time ago, in looking at the entire history, let's say, America was not a relevant country. Nowadays, it's the most important country in the world. You have to admire that.
If a country seems like it's everywhere, then it's going to seem much harder to invade. Most modern talk of a potential US invasion involves two vaster countries, China and Russia. Yet a traditional invasion, the keyword being traditional here, is unlikely from either of them. Perhaps more worrisome than a potential traditional attack is the threat of cyber warfare. Attacks on the systems that keep the US running could potentially do more long-term damage than attacks on the country itself. That's not to mention the power of foreign-backed disinformation campaigns online. But this gets away from the original...
Wait, what the hell was that? And is this even true? I mean, I never know if this type of stuff is true.
Power of foreign-backed disinformation campaigns online. But this gets away from the original question I asked at the beginning of this video. Why has the US never been successfully invaded? And why will it likely never be invaded as long as it exists?
Never.
The answer is rooted in geography, war, imperialism, and raw global power. The US stretches across...
Oh, come on, my friends. If you are watching this video, you are so proud of your country. So basically, geography is impossible, is almost impossible to invade America. Then you guys are so powerful when it comes to military. It's crazy. It's actually, and you guys are also everywhere. You know, you have bases all around the world. That's amazing.
Oceans
Let's run this part back, sorry.
never be invaded as long as it exists? The answer is rooted in geography, war, imperialism, and raw global power. The US stretches across oceans with a history of equal parts expansionist and bloody. Put simply,
crazy.
the US has never been successfully invaded in modern times because it's vast. And not vast in the initially obvious way.
And
the
powerful.
United States stretches not only across the North American continent, but over islands dotted throughout the ocean and through small pockets in countries around the world. It's a distance so vast you can't even see it on most American maps.
Oh, it's ending.
That is the end of our first video on this channel. Thank you so much for making it all.
Okay, thank you so much for watching this with me, my friends. This was really interesting. I knew that the geography in America is very impressive. I was aware of that. But I actually end up enjoying this video a lot because the guy ended up putting imperialism right is a big part, geography, and you guys having so powerful when it comes to military power. That those things combined are quite crazy, right, my friends? But yeah, thank you so much for watching this with me. Really means a lot. You guys end up staying until the end. See you guys in the next one. Bye, my friends.